What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Lawyer You Know, day 5 of the Kouri Richins trial, and we get to do it on Saturday morning, which I love. It's kind of nice to have a day off of doing videos at night on Friday, and that's probably going to be our schedule going forward, but it was a very eventful day. We got to see the defense end with probably what is going to be the most difficult witness for them because there were a lot of points they had to get out, a lot of good that they could do with Carmen, but also she was a very difficult witness for a number of reasons. And I'll talk more about kind of the strategy and where I think the defense went wrong with that and give you a little teaser to what my dad said in the podcast because we recorded the podcast yesterday. But we also got to hear from probably the most difficult witness from the state that they're going to call in their case in chief. Why did they call him? How did they deal with him? What could they have done differently? And how much is that going to affect their case? Did they blow it with that one witness? We also had a witness that the judge shut down the cameras. It seemed like that wasn't necessarily planned for because he got up on the stand and started talking. We'll talk about that and all the other witnesses that were called on day 5 and where we think the prosecution has gotten after 1 week of trial. I can't wait to dig into it with you guys. Pause on that, okay? All right, let's get to it. All right, so we started day 5 with Carmen still on the stand and the defense still cross-examining her. When I talked to my dad about how he would deal with this, whether he would take his time, whether he would try to simplify it, whether he would try to get her on and off the stand, I'm going to wait and let you hear his answer. But I was a little bit surprised with how he answered and what his strategy would have been. I think it's a little bit different than mine. I mean, obviously the big points are the same, but maybe the way that we would do it are different. But we were back with Carmen and the defense decided to continue to go through the interviews, continue to try to pick out and impeach her on any little discrepancy that they could find between the 7 different interviews. To me, the first, 75% of the cross on day 5 of this witness, which was day 2 of cross-examining her, this is repetitious. I feel like we already heard it. And more importantly, I feel like you already made this point, that she was inconsistent between all the interviews and that a lot of those inconsistencies seemed to be she just gave the state whatever she wanted and she couldn't really necessarily back them up, but not that she was lying, but that she was trying to make sure it fit into what the state wanted. And frankly, from my perspective, I don't blame her, right? If you can save your life with this testimony and you're sober now and you made a lot of mistakes in the past and you can kind of make them all right here. And I believe she thinks Kouri did this to Eric. I believe the prosecutors and law enforcement thinks Kouri did this to Eric. So in her mind, she's doing the right thing. But if you're a criminal defense attorney and you have these inconsistent statements and you have a witness that you think lacks credibility, you have to highlight that for the jury. You have to point that out to the jury. And that's what this defense attorney is trying to do. She did get her to admit, okay, here's some maybe additional points. I mean, so much of it to me was the same, but she said that Carmen figured out how to game the system. Carmen said no. The lawyer said, if the prosecutor testifies to something different, would you be surprised? Which made me think, are we going to hear about the prosecutor and some of Carmen's drug cases to come and impeach her? Because I think if they do call some witnesses to impeach her, that's going to be even more difficult. That's going to be even more difficult for Carmen. Then we had some clunky impeachments that didn't go well. But she also got her to say that her memory was better 1 year after this incident rather than 4. And the interview that happened 1 year is better for the defense than the one that happened 4 years after the incident. She said she never used anyone else's urine. There's like a bunch of things that you often lied about how often you use drugs. And she even kind of impeached her 4 years sober. Cause I think she's like, at some point you said, the last time you took drugs was October of 2022 or something, which is not 4 years ago, or even, April or March of 2022 is still not 4 years ago. So, are you lying about how long you've been sober? She didn't necessarily say that, but that's kind of what I think was coming up. She didn't press the issue because I think she probably felt some of what people were saying from yesterday. And I do think that there are people on both teams paying attention to what the public is saying. So I thought this was interesting from a lawyer's perspective. The state would object when the defense would put in certain comments and make them read other parts of the interview. That's judge by judge specific. Some judges will say, you'll have the opportunity to add context later. We're not going to force them to read the whole interview. This judge kind of took a middle ground where he's like, I'm going to make you keep reading until I feel like you've given it proper context. That makes the job of a defense attorney much more difficult because now what you prepared, you have to go back, and if you only pulled certain quotes, you've got to go back and find it, and it makes it even more clunky. And I think that happened to this defense attorney a couple times because the judge did make her keep reading for more context. Then I thought, again, the first 75%, not great, but when they got into the interview with the AUSA, which is the feds, right? The U.S. Attorney's Office, different than the cops we saw that interview recorded. The AUSAs, the feds, were like, we're not going to tell you. You tell us what you remember, and how it's very different than when the cops laid it out for her, gave her the blueprint, some would say, wrote it all out for her, and she signed the bottom line. That's how I would have done it. I would have compared it. I would have put all those quotes in sequential order with what the cops did and built the picture like that versus interview by interview, making it very confusing and clunky. That's how I would have done it. And then, this lawyer, I felt for her, and this is something I wanted to say because I know a lot of people hate her. Her style and demeanor, and she's kind of a little bit grating at times, but this was not an easy task. With all these interviews, all these inconsistent statements, and a witness that's going to constantly say, I don't remember, it is not easy to do. It is not easy to do. And from my perspective, you have to do it a way that is simple and that the jury understands and doesn't get confused with. And this lawyer multiple times would be like, okay, in 23, when you say, I'm sorry, I mean 22, and now everybody's confused. And this happened so many times, the judge had to jump in. And the judge had to discuss which one are we on? Let's do it this way. Let's make sure we read it. Let's make sure we do it the right way, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not great. That's not great. I also love the judge mentioning, why don't you say, did you remember this versus did you say this? Because that's a different question. And neither of the lawyers said that, and this wasn't the objection by the prosecution, but the judge points out for clarity's sake, because when you're talking about it as evidence, do you remember it? Or are we just saying that, yes, I said this in an interview because we are after the truth? Also, if anybody noticed the shirt I was wearing today, this is my inverted lawyer t-shirt. And this was made during the Karen Reed case when we had the inverted video from the Sally Port. Well, we have another inverted document / picture in this video. Is it the biggest deal in the world? Probably not. But I thought it was interesting that the video was switched, which again, when you turn your phone on, whatever that mode is called when it's facing you, sometimes it mirrors images. But Carmen actually testified, I was not driving because I didn't have a driver's license. And actually, Carmen was driving. And she gave reasons that, had to do with drugs and stuff, why this person wasn't driving, why they were coming and going or whatever. I thought that was very interesting. And I thought it just showed again, did I think it showed that Carmen was lying? Did I think the state was trying to perpetuate fraud on the court? No. But it made me think that Carmen was not going to resist. She was not going to make anything difficult on the state. She was going to try and make her testimony as good for the state as possible because she wanted to do everything she could to convict Kouri Richins to fix her life. So from my perspective, I thought that was interesting and just another little issue with the credibility of Carmen. For any jurors that don't believe Carmen, for any jurors that think she might have credibility issues, I thought that flipped picture was another check mark there. Now, I think it could also have just gotten completely lost in this clunky cross. Carmen also agreed that in some of the interviews, she said there was only 3 deals, not 4. And some of this is building as the defense because when we get to Robbie later, some of these inconsistencies, you can see why they're important. So kind of a long lead up because we did a lot of Carmen yesterday, but I did want to play the last couple minutes of Cross because this is kind of the summation, the summary of what the defense was trying to get out at Cross. We're going to listen to that now.
Selling the whole time.
The whole period we're talking about of February 22.
Yes.
Kouri never once asked you for fentanyl, correct?
No, not correct. I mean, yes. Wait, you confused me. Can you answer the question again?
Kouri never asked you for fentanyl, true?
I had told her that that's what Robbie had, and she said, okay, go ahead and get it.
Let me ask the question again. Kouri never asked you for fentanyl, true?
Yes.
All right. And you bought prescription oxycodone from Susan Kohler, correct?
Correct.
You got light green pills from Crozier sometime in February of 2022, correct?
Correct.
And then you went back and said, give me more of the same, correct?
Correct.
And the last time you went back was after Eric Richins died, correct?
I'm not sure.
Well, the last purchase was May 9th of 2020, March 9th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
After, and you know Eric died on March 4th, correct?
Again, May 9th, I mean, March 4th, it's like that type of stuff. You just can't do that, especially when you're in this summation part and you're trying to do quick hitters at the end. It's really tough when you mess up those dates.
It was March 5th he passed away?
Well, I think it was March 4th, but either way,
Sure,
the
correct.
pills were after he passed away,
Correct.
correct? All right. And again, a year after the fact, you said numerous times, I bought pills from Mr. Crozier twice, correct?
Correct.
Now you're saying 3 times, 4 years later, correct?
Correct.
Because that's been told to you because of some data you saw, correct?
Yes, correct.
But you don't remember that.
No, I don't know.
Okay. So, after you said you were willing to cooperate, and they said you were getting a big jail get out of free card, you got your big jail get out of free card so far, right?
Correct.
Because you have not been in jail for the past 3 years,
Correct.
and you haven't had to go to drug court anymore, correct?
Correct.
And all you do is wait to see how your testimony goes to find out what happens, correct?
Correct.
You're not being drug tested, correct?
Correct.
Even though you're on probation, correct?
Correct.
And your probation consists of, in the morning, you say hi to Detective Maynard, and he says lobber.
We just text back and forth. If I'm leaving town, I tell him I'm leaving town. If I'm here, you know.
Okay, so you tell him if you're leaving town. Are
I
you?
still keep tabs. He still keeps tabs on me. No matter where I'm at, he has my work schedule. He has everything.
He does have your work schedule.
Yes.
And you've been allowed to move to Las Vegas, correct?
Yes.
So, because of your cooperation, you got out of going to drug court, correct?
Correct.
You got your probation transferred to Summit County with Detective Maynard, correct?
Correct.
You got to stop your drug testing, correct?
Correct.
You got to move to Vegas, correct?
Correct. But I'm not living in Vegas. I'm living here.
You're here right now.
Judge maybe approved me to move to Vegas, but I'm still here in Utah.
You haven't moved to Vegas yet?
No.
Okay. You've been allowed to go to Vegas numerous times to visit, though, right?
Correct.
All right. And you haven't done any time for any of the crimes that you committed, correct?
Correct. I was incarcerated. I stayed in jail for 23 days.
Well,
That's it.
23 days when you were arrested in April of 2023.
Yes.
And it was during that time period you were in jail because you were getting your story together with Detectives Maynard and Detective O'Driscoll.
Yes.
Okay. And the pills that you bought from Mr. Crozier, you don't know what those pills were, correct?
He had told me that he had fentanyl.
You didn't look at the pills, correct?
No, I didn't sit there and play with them. No.
You didn't know what they were, correct?
Correct.
You didn't have them tested.
No.
Okay. You didn't take any, you said,
No.
correct?
Correct.
You did or you did not sell them to anyone else?
I did not sell them to anyone else.
Okay. You don't know what happened to those pills, correct?
I don't know who picked him up, but that's what you're asking.
Right. You don't know who took those pills, correct?
Correct.
And you have, sitting here today, absolutely no information about what happened to Eric Richins other than that what you were told that he died of a fentanyl overdose.
Correct.
And you have no idea what happened the night that Eric Richins died.
I do not.
And you have no knowledge if Ms. Richins killed Eric Richins.
I do not.
Can I just have a moment?
I mean, that summation, you can understand some of the points she's trying to get, some of the inconsistencies. She doesn't actually know what happened. She didn't test the pills. She didn't take the pills. And it's your get out of jail free card. And look at all these, benefits you've gotten from testifying here. That summation, I think, was a lot easier to follow than so much of her cross, because so much of her cross was so confusing. All right, let me hit some comments here. Selena said, hey, I've been in the courtroom this week. It's been quite the wild ride. I can answer any questions. So I have had a number of people reach out to me that have been in the courtroom. So I appreciate all the context, Selena, that you can give. That's awesome. But one of the interesting things is I've had some people reach out and be like, oh, they hate the defense attorneys. They're falling asleep or rolling their eyes. And then I've had other people be like, they're way more engaged with the defense attorneys. They're only listening when the defense attorneys are up there. So I do think, perceptions on what people are seeing and from the perspective of each juror, it could be different depending on which juror you're looking at, right? And so I think we can guess, and even as a lawyer trying cases, like you're sitting there, you think you might know what some jurors say, but you really don't know. You really don't know, right? You really don't know what the jurors are thinking, but we do our best to see when they are engaged, when they're taking notes. And I've appreciated everybody that's reached out and told me the jurors are taking a lot of notes here and not there. So Selena, I really appreciate any insight you can give. That's amazing. Seems like the prosecution could be objecting more. Defense seems to be doing a lot of testifying, asking the same questions multiple times, etc. So there's always strategy in this, in that, do you let them kind of sink themselves, right? Do you save them with an objection? Are they being so confusing? Just let them be confusing because they'll lose it throughout the process. But there's definitely sometimes I think they should have been objecting both sides that they haven't been. So I agree with you there. I am sympathetic to Carmen and the position she's been put in by law enforcement, and also do not find her credible. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's always going to be people that say, you're a horrible person if you don't find Carmen credible. You're so mean. How could you do that to somebody like this? I stand with Carmen. And it's like, okay, I get that. And I understand the world that we live in. And it's, to some people, it's black and white like that. I feel for Carmen. I stand with Carmen. I hope that, her sobriety journey, that she continues on it. I know it's very difficult always, and people can fall back and then still get back on track. And I hope that she does. She's been through a lot. I still don't find everything she said credible. I do find some of it credible. I definitely think she's credible in the situation around Kouri asking her to get pills. Do I think all the specific details she's giving are actually her specific details based on her mindset at the time, what she was going through? Sorry, John's clicking some comments. What she was going through? No, I don't find every little detail credible necessarily. And I'm going to be looking for other context and other evidence in this trial, for which there's still weeks left, right? To see if it's all corroborated and if it's enough to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Michelle said, the irony of the defense lawyer trying to impeach a witness on details while getting the details wrong. Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal. I do think this defense team knows the case, but I think there's a lot more to it than people may understand with all these different interviews and documents and pictures and cell phone data. And it's hard to wrangle sometimes, especially without technology. The TikTok psychic got slammed for $10 million yesterday. Good. My opinion, good. Justice. That's what that looks like. Hey, everyone. I was in the courtroom Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week. So if you have any questions. Okay, sorry. So Selena, this is the same person, Selena. And Selena's also a member. Welcome, Selena. Thanks for joining the crew. Okay, so now on redirect. So when he got up for redirect, I was thinking, I don't even know if I would redirect this witness. I might just let it be. He basically leads her the whole time and asks her about her anxiety and any treatment that she had. And it was very, very short. It was very, very short. I thought it was a good enough redirect. You don't want to dig in and then, give the defense attorney another day of cross based on what you brought up in redirect. All right. Then a very interesting discussion. The prosecution team wants to put in all 7 of Carmen's interviews, and the defense objects. And I found that to be interesting. I was like, all you've been talking about is these 7 interviews, but you don't want them in. Why is that? To me, this whole discussion happened outside the presence of the jury. We obviously haven't read all 7 interviews, but it certainly made me think that there's a lot more consistencies than inconsistencies in those 7 interviews. And the defense attorneys were trying to pick and choose some of them. And the state is not allowed to go through and read every consistent statement she made through all 7 of those. So I think the judge made the right decision not allowing them in unless the prosecution team can say all these statements fit into an exception of hearsay. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But I found that very interesting. Very interesting. All right, the next witness was Anna Isbel, who knew Kouri Richins from high school, and her significant other was a handyman of Kouri's. And he was on the phone with Kouri one day. And here's basically the entirety of the testimony that the state wanted to get out, which to me, this witness, I found to be credible. But this witness as a lawyer made me feel like the state was grasping at straws a little bit. It really did. That's my view on it. I'm not saying that's yours. I'm not saying that's the jury's. But when you feel like you have to call a witness like this just to say the word fentanyl, that somebody else heard the word fentanyl, you're grasping at straws. You don't have a lot of hard evidence that Kouri got the fentanyl, gave it to Eric, and forced Eric to ingest it or tricked him into ingesting it. So basically, the entirety of this witness's testimony was her significant other, who was a handyman of Kouri, was on the phone. They were talking about needing something for a client. Anna goes to the bathroom. Anna goes to the bathroom. When she comes back out, her significant other's like, fentanyl, what? F that client. That's it. And the reason they couldn't call her significant other is that he had passed away from a motorcycle accident, which is brutal and sad. I feel horrible for her. But that gives you an exception to hearsay where the declarant is unavailable. So she was able to say what she heard. There's probably a lot of exceptions to hearsay. Maybe they're not using it for the truth of the matter asserted. Maybe it's the effect on the listener. But there's all sorts of reasons why this comment by her significant other was allowed to come in, even though he didn't testify. But to me, I was like, that's interesting that they had to call her just to say like, no, there was more to this fentanyl thing than, meets the eye. And when they called her, between Carmen and Robbie is who Carmen got the drugs from. And then by calling this witness that I don't know if the defense would have called this witness, right? We're going to get to Robbie and why the state called Robbie. And one of my reasons for calling Robbie for the state, because he was a very bad witness for them, is that I think the defense would have absolutely called Robbie. So you had to as the state, so you weren't hiding from him. But Anna, I don't necessarily know why they called Anna if this was going to be the cross, because I thought this was a great point for the defense to highlight some of the issues they were trying to bring up in Carmen's cross. So let's take a listen to this exchange between the defense attorney and Anna. But again, the defense attorney steps in it a little bit, doing things that I felt like were unnecessary personally, which she does at the end. But the beginning, when we're talking about these text messages between Anna and law enforcement, it's not a good look for law enforcement in this case. It's really not a good look.
A text between you and Detective Otis.
Yes.
He sent you a text.
So these are texts between she and the same detectives that were questioning Carmen, and that I would keep repeating, gave her the blueprint, told her what to say, told her you need to give us the details to convict Kouri Richins. I would keep repeating all those things.
That said, so you can make our life easier and answer our calls so we can prep you on what you're going to be asked. Next time I knock on your door, I'll have a warrant and a catch pole for your dog, correct?
It would make our life a lot easier if we could meet with you. If not, next time I'm going to have a warrant when I knock on your door and a catch pole for your dog. So you guys know I don't have a dog. But for all of those of you with dogs, if you were just a witness in a case and you did nothing wrong, and the cops were like, if you don't help us help you with your testimony, I'm showing up with a warrant and I'm going to put your dog in this catcher. How would you feel about that? How would you feel about that?
Yes. Now, he was talking about that they reached out and asked you to come in to be prepped for your testimony.
Oh, overall.
Overall, okay. And
Your Honor, she misread the text. I know it's out there and the jury can read it for themselves. But
If they can. I mean, it's small. Yeah, can we zoom in, Katie? Pause for 1 second. Can you folks read that? Can we maybe go to...
Turn her mic back on.
easier and answer our calls so we can prep you later, hopefully, so until you are needed to testify. So make your life easier and answer our calls so we can prep you on what you will be asked. Otherwise, the next time I knock on your door, I'll have a warrant and a catch pole for the dog. That's what he said, correct?
Yes.
I don't need to be prepped. Give me the time and date and I will appear. He says it's on your subpoena. You ask, is there more an exact date or a date? Do I need to be there February 23rd through March 26th? His response, we could have discussed that if you ever replied, but since you don't want to, you can plan on showing up every day at 8 o'clock.
How about that? She's like, well, can you at least just tell me what day I need to show up? I don't need to be prepped. I'm just going to come tell the truth. Just tell me what day I need to show up. He goes, if you don't talk to me, you can show up every day at 8 o'clock. And somebody said, this is how he treats someone who's innocent. Now look at how he thinks about someone who's guilty. Interesting. Exactly. These are the kinds of powers that cops have. And let's just, if you want to assume for arguendo, as they say, that Kouri Richins is completely guilty, okay? Because I know that's what a lot of people in the chat think. Let's just assume Kouri Richins is completely guilty and this person's going to come be a witness against her. This is still wrong for law enforcement. This is still wrong. You cannot act like this. You cannot assert this force and authority to try and affect somebody's testimony because you're worried that the truth might not be good for you. You can't do it. I don't care how guilty the person is sitting in that chair. And I think the cops obviously believe Kouri Richins is guilty as sin. Can the defendant ask the jurors about feelings on addicts? Absolutely. In jury selection, that would have been a huge part of my voir dire. Who here has experience with drug and alcohol addiction in your family, yourself, whatever? That would have been a huge part of it. How do you rate the attorneys after 1 week, Peter? I think the lead prosecutor is the best attorney in the courtroom. I would say overall, if I had to give like just overall, how is the attorneys? I would say a C minus overall lawyering, C to a C minus. I don't think it's been great overall, personally. Now the judge is in the A range. I don't know if I'd go A plus just yet, but really would love to try a case in front of this judge. I think you know what you get, and he's going to be fair and direct and make decisions, which is all I ask for a judge. This defense attorney is sneak and knows she is trying to confuse the witness. She confused the judge and the prosecution. Everyone's in the chat. Okay for Robbie to have inconsistent, but not CL. Don't trust defense attorney. So here's what I'll say. I don't think it's not a win for the defense attorney to confuse the judge and the jury and everybody else. Okay, so if she's trying to do that, that's a miss. Now, for you to say that it's okay for Robbie to have inconsistent statements, but not Carmen, I think you might be confusing the roles of a prosecutor and a defense attorney. If everybody's inconsistent and nothing is really proven and the jury doesn't really know what to believe, that's all good for the defense. They don't care if Robbie's inconsistent, Carmen's, if everybody's inconsistent, they want to point that out. Of course, they're going to bring out what's good for them. But if you can't prove something, that's good for the defense. How could Ms. Lewis try to impeach Carmen on the phone calls when Carmen said, I don't recall saying that? I didn't say that. When the calls were played, what was said wasn't what the attorney said. So I'd need the specific quote here to get whether it's impeachment. You can refresh your recollection. And, you know, from my perspective, whether or not the judge allows it to be played as collateral evidence for the impeachment really depends on the statement by statement level. Thank you, Susan, so much for gifting a Lawyer You Know membership, and Azam for gifting a Lawyer You Know membership. Tons of them coming through here. Thank you guys so much. And Goody for gifting 5 Lawyer You Know memberships. All right, let's listen because there's more from this witness I found very interesting.
Next page. Your response. I don't need to be prepped. Give me the time and date and I will appear. Oh, so this is the same. It's repeated. It's on your subpoena, February 23rd. Plan on being there every day. And then you say, I would like it over text message so that I have exactly what you say in writing. And again, he says you're legally obligated to show up on the dates and times on the subpoena. So let's go back. First of all, what was your reaction when he sent you these text messages?
Oh, I was livid. I was very upset. I thought it was rude, inconsiderate, not how you should treat somebody that did nothing wrong.
Okay. And you were asking if he would give you an exact date to show up to court instead of telling you to be here every day, correct?
Yeah.
And he said, well, no.
Yeah.
You'd be
Should've
here
talked
every
to me.
day, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that's because you didn't want to come in and be prepped, correct?
I didn't want to speak to them at all.
All right, but you never refused to come in and testify because you were legally obligated to do so. Is that fair?
I never refused.
All right. Now, he said that next time I knock on your door, I'll be there with a warrant and a pole for the dog.
Mm-hmm.
So he threatened to arrest you if he had to come back to try and talk to you.
Yes.
And he said the next time. He'd been to your home before?
Yeah.
Did your dog attempt to attack O'Driscoll when he was at your home before?
No.
Is your dog a vicious dog?
He's a big dog. He's very protective, especially after Hayden's passed. He's behind a fence that you aren't supposed to open unless somebody that knows him is there.
Did he attempt to bite Detective O'Driscoll?
Absolutely not.
Did he touch Detective O'Driscoll?
I don't think he's ever seen my dog. Maybe through the fence.
Through the fence. So you didn't sick your dog on Detective O'Driscoll?
Never.
All right. Okay, thank you. Now let's go back. Sorry that took so long. You recently completed rehab, right, Nana?
Okay, so just end the cross, okay? End the cross, because I think that was great. I think that showed exactly what they wanted to show, that law enforcement is trying to pressure witnesses. But of course, I wouldn't even bring up, like that whole, she heard her boyfriend say fentanyl. Like, I don't feel like that's that big of evidence. I don't think you need to attack that. But of course, I don't feel like these defense attorneys are leaving anything on the table. And as you see from good defenses or defense attorneys, you pick and choose what your best arguments are. And for these defense attorneys, I feel like they're trying to hit every single thing, which sometimes can make you lose your good points. So I think she goes to a totally unnecessary point here to try and attack the credibility or memory of this witness.
Go back. Sorry that took so long. You recently completed rehab, right, Nana?
Yeah.
Fairly recently. I mean, it wasn't like last week, but fairly
Yeah.
recently. And your drug of choice was alcohol. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You're doing well. No.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How were you doing in 2022?
Sorry, what year was that even? I like based my years off like, was Hayden dead or not at that time? I'm 2022.
Let me make it simple.
Yeah, give me a point of date.
During the time when this phone call happened, were you sober?
What phone call?
The phone call you're here to talk about between Hayden and Kouri.
I had just got done with dinner, so I think like Hayden and I had went to Sushi Blue that night. So I probably had like a drink there.
Okay. So before we get to the phone call, just a couple of other questions. So you said Hayden did handyman work.
So she basically just brought up, like, were you drunk and not paying attention on that phone call? It's like, I think it was unnecessary personally, but she did get her to say that, did you ever hear that on that call that Kouri asked for fentanyl? I did not. So that was kind of the punchline at the end of Cross. And I'm going to answer a couple questions now before we get to the witness of the day. It matters whether or not there was fentanyl in the pills, but does it matter if Kouri, Carmen, or the dealer knew there was fentanyl laced or not? And that's one of the questions I've had, right? If Kouri put whatever those pills were, was there enough to kill him? But I guess if she thought she was buying oxy and it had fentanyl, it was fentanyl because there was no oxy in his system, right? So if it was fentanyl and she gave it to him, would the oxy have killed him, or was the oxy kind of for fun for them to have to do, like for fun? There's just a lot of questions there, and I do think it has to be fentanyl. She bought fentanyl. She wanted to give him fentanyl. She wanted to end his life with fentanyl. I do think it has to be there. A lot of people saying she thinks it was because of the Michael Jackson stuff. That's fine. She said, okay, did you know the Michael Jackson? I thought it was a muscle relaxer. Okay, that was also part of Anna's testimony. All I'm saying is I was lost during Carmen's Cross. My ADHD was through the roof. My issue was she was so disoriented and disorganized and all over the place, so I never knew what she was asking. I get that, Ace. And I agree. I think that was the big misstep by the defense, is even the good points that I was trying to pick out, as we're listening and pausing and I'm pulling clips, I think it's so easy for all of that to have gotten lost in the way it was presented to the jury. And so all of those points could have been for naught. And I would completely understand if a juror felt that way, completely, and the way that you described it here. I think the defense is laying a good foundation for reasonable doubt, even though I feel she did it. So when I came into this, and from what I knew, I was like, Kouri Richins is diabolical. Like, this is so bad. This is so bad. We'll see what they can prove. We'll see what the evidence is. And I don't have a problem thinking, yes, somebody probably did it and voting not guilty. A lot of people in the world do have a problem with that. And there are defense attorneys that will show charts and say, if you think she maybe did it, it's not guilty. If you think she probably did it, it's not guilty. If you think she might have done it, it's not guilty. But the world has a problem with that graph. And that's probably where I think I am right now with Kouri Richins. But there's a lot of time left for the state to bring evidence. And perfect time for this question. Find Iron said, Peter, you are always rather biased towards the defense. Not every prosecution hiccup is a brownie for the defense. Depends on the juror. Run a poll and ask your audience, and you will see most people hated the defense. Say, I don't need to run a poll to know that. I agree with you. Most of the audience, most of the chat thinks Kouri Richins is guilty and would vote guilty right now. That's fine. I'm not sending those people away. I want to talk to those people. I want to talk to everybody, whatever their opinion is on the case. I'm not afraid of anybody's opinion or comments. I'm also not surprised by many of them. That's okay. And if you think I'm always, when you use words like always and never, I think it's important. When you say words like always, I would encourage you, and maybe you were here, find Iron for that case, just to go back to the very last trial we covered, the Brendan Banfield trial. Go watch that one and tell me if you think I was biased toward the defense in that case. I think that my bias towards presumption of innocence and the rule of law and the burdens in the case beyond a reasonable doubt do make people tend to think I'm biased towards the defense. I prosecuted cases, put people in jail. I've defended cases, and now mostly I do civil work. My dad was a state and federal prosecutor for a long time that I learned everything from, and he's been a criminal defense attorney for a long time. So we've done it on both ends. We want fairness. We want justice. That's how I look at it. And I do think that some people think that means you're defense friendly, and that's okay. That doesn't bother me. This is kind of interesting. Kouri has had 3 to 4 family members in the courtroom. Eric's family has taken up a whole row. Okay. I wonder what people think when they, look at who's sitting behind who. I wonder what jurors think always. Peter, will the phone extractions and cell phone locations be more important testimony than what Carmen and Robbie remember? Much love from Louisiana. I think that part of this is going to be adding corroboration to Carmen and Robbie for the stuff that's good for the state. It's like, they said they only went to the Maverick here. They said they only went to the Maverick on this date. Look, this lines up with that. This lines up with that. And now whether or not the details of, was it fentanyl? Did she ask for fentanyl? Did she know it was fentanyl? Did they give her fentanyl? And was it 4? Was it 3? Whatever it may be, to me, the goal for the state is going to be not the specific details, but to add overall corroboration with the state's story, because the way the state wins this case is the story. The motive, the means, the opportunity, Kouri Richins' text messages, her pictures, the means she searched, her affair. That's how they win this case. And it's kind of big picture rather than on the details. I think the details are where it gets more shaky for the state. All right, so let's jump into Robbie. The state jumps off the same way they did with Carmen, his criminal drug history. He was dealing in 2022. He also has 3 grants of immunity. And all he has to do is be honest. They get to Nicole Cummings. She asked for Roxy's. He met her at the Maverick. He said he met her maybe once, maybe twice. Definitely not 3 times. And that was the first time I was like, uh-oh. I can tell that is not what the prosecutor wanted him to say. And I don't think he was exactly surprised by that, okay? I don't think the prosecutor was surprised that he didn't give him what he wanted. I think he knew this was going to be a difficult witness. Every deal was the same. She would give him money. He would give her the pills. He doesn't really remember clearly. That's just how he did it. And he dealt for like 3 or 4 people. He didn't deal for, 1 million people. And I think it was like 30 to 40 pills. And now we're going to get into kind of the prosecutor, whenever they have to bring up an interview or kind of impeach or refresh a recollection of their own witness, it's not great. But unlike Anna, I think the state had to call Robbie. We heard his name a ton through Carmen's testimony. He's a big part of this. He's where the fentanyl originated from. If you don't call him, it's like not calling Proctor. And then if the defense calls him and they can say, I wonder why they didn't call Robbie. I wonder why they didn't call the originator of the fentanyl. Because he was bad for them, because he didn't give her fentanyl, because nobody asked for fentanyl, because fentanyl was never included with anything that has to do with Kouri Richins. We don't know how Eric Richins got the fentanyl. So they had to call him. I think they did about as good as they can, but it was terrible. It was terrible for them. He was a horrible witness for them. He was a difficult witness for them. And we're seeing now, we're going to watch kind of the difference between the prosecution going through this difficulty right in juxtaposition from the defense going through it with Carmen.
Interviewing with Summit County detectives on May the 4th, 2023.
Vaguely. I remember I was in jail. I hadn't been there very long. I was on a lot of drugs at that time, so I was detoxing from those drugs. And I remember going in a conference room and speaking with them, but I don't really recall a lot of the discussion.
That right there is good for the defense, right? What did the other person say? It's a brownie for the defense. I mean, the fact that when he made statements that were good for the state, he admits I was not in my right mind, which Carmen agrees to, that drugs can do that.
Which jail?
Davis County Jail.
Yeah, it's not rocket surgery selling drugs.
Do you recall whether they asked you if Carmen asked for blues specifically or fentanyl specifically?
I have read the report, so I know that they did, but I don't remember them saying that to me.
Okay, and by report, do you mean a transcript of their
Yes.
interview?
Yeah.
So you know from reading a transcript of their interview that they asked you whether Carmen asked for blues or fentanyl on one hand or oxys on the other hand?
Yes.
Do you recall how you responded to that question?
Not right offhand. I think I said something to the extent of that I thought they were. I didn't know if they were fentanyl or Roxy's, but whatever she asked for is what she got.
That's good for the state. I don't know if it was fentanyl or Roxy's, but whatever she asked for, she got. That's why you have to call them, because you do get good nuggets, even though overall, very tough, very tough. This is something they're going to have to overcome. And again, I hesitate to say I hope, but if Kouri Richins did this, I hope that the state presents the evidence to convict her and justice is served. So I hope that they can have some corroborating evidence to overcome this. And I hope that this is not enough to nuke the case completely for them. And I hope they have a lot more to present. So the jury's not just going to be remembering how inconsistent and bad this was and how much this just raised doubt to the entire drug deals that the state is relying on how Kouri got the fentanyl, which we have really not heard any of how Eric got the fentanyl in his system yet.
Do you recall your answer to that specific question of theirs, whether she asked for blues specifically or fentanyl on one hand or oxys on the other hand?
No.
If I were to show you that transcript again, would you be able to recall?
I mean, I'm not going to remember it, but I can.
Would that help
see
you
it.
refresh it?
I could see like what it says. I mean, yeah. So, but as far as remembering it, that was 3 years ago.
And that makes it difficult to refresh your recollection and Peach. He is definitely, so let me compare him and Carmen. He, I think, enjoys being a difficult witness. I think he is trying harder to be difficult than Carmen. I think Carmen really didn't remember and didn't want to argue and was just like, get me off this stand and let me go back, let me get my immunity and move on. That's what I felt more like with Carmen. For him, I feel like he enjoyed it a little bit, being difficult. Because he's like, well, what if I show you a transcript? He's like, I mean, I can read the transcript, but I'm not saying I'll remember what I said, which could be true, obviously, too, because the mind state that he was in. But I felt a different vibe, I'll just say.
Many years ago, and I was in a rough state at the time that I had that conversation with them.
Scott, can we bring up for the witness, please, 8-46, Tango?
I'm going to skip a little because, like everything
No,
else.
sorry.
And by the way, the prosecutor struggled with it too. And this is like, he's got 2 affidavits. Imagine dealing with 7 interviews. Like it's difficult. It's a difficult task. I'm going to jump ahead till they get to the spot where they actually are reading it.
Yeah, but it says that
Blues or fentanyl specifically, and how you responded to the investigator's question of whether she wanted blues or fentanyl specifically or oxys?
yeah, but it says that yes. Okay. Yeah.
So how did you respond to that?
Can I take this witness on board for just one moment?
Not at the moment. You gotta let me answer that question.
Oh, we approach.
Yes.
Okay, and then they approach, and there's a sidebar.
Like this.
Investigators asked you,
All right, so before we get to that, there's some comments here I want to read. I wish everyone could have heard the undercover officer's testimony today. We're going to get to that and talk about it, and talk about what we are going to talk about, what we're not, and why. Yesterday was so clunky, it was surprising to hear Rob say he did not sell fentanyl in 22. Where did it come from? Off topic, but I cracked up when the prosecution said that drug deals weren't like rocket surgery. I know, so did I. It's funny. And yeah, I agree. Some of the big ticket items that I wasn't selling it at that point. I just wasn't. It's tough. That's tough. Where are Eric's texts? We don't know what he was buying. Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know what we're going to get and what we're not going to get. So that's still open for discussion. By the way, I don't know if I've asked anybody to like the video yet. We're almost at an hour. Hit the like button now, and maybe we'll go over an hour. Maybe we'll get some overtime. Peter, wondering why in the world the police would interview him when he was totally high as a kite. Maybe to see if they could get what they needed to get the details to put Kouri Richins away. And if not, they could say, oh, he was high. We'll talk to him later. And if they did, they use it like they did now. Or maybe he didn't tell them he was high as a kite because he was detoxing. And, it's a spectrum, right? When are you good? When are you not? If you look at what people say as a projection of what they think or feel, it can change your perspective. I think the judge thought she was sneaky, made her read line by line because of what she is trying to get in her own words by testifying herself. Don't ask, recall the question. Don't ask question. I guess it could be that. I think the judge wants the truth to come out. He wants the proper context. He doesn't want, cherry picking, but cherry picking happens in literally every trial. Most of my trials, it's cherry picking out of medical records to make it seem a certain way when it's not, but it's the other lawyer's job to add and build that context. Thank you, S. Spees, for 5 Lawyer You Know memberships.
Whether Carmen Lauber asked specifically for blues or fentanyl or oxy, how did you respond?
I said that she asked probably for blues, but at that time, Roxy's were blues. It wasn't like it was like the slang on the street was, when people bought Roxy's, they were buying blues. It was before, this influx of fentanyl that, and it also said that so M30s, yeah, that's what the Roxy's were stamped with was M30s. That's the manufacturer stamp. It's not just a fentanyl thing.
Do you recall investigators then clarifying that very thing with you and asking, it wasn't like she was asking for oxys and got M30s, right? Do you remember the investigators asking you for that clarification?
Well, oxys implies that they would have been oxycodone to me, but M30s would be fentanyl, or not fentanyl, but Roxy's. At that time in 2022.
By the way, that's a leading question. And again, I would have objected a ton to leading because I think this would have been even more difficult for the prosecutor if he was not allowed to lead with this witness. Because I thought this witness was giving him nothing, but regardless.
Early 2022.
Well, I think that confusions what the investigators were trying to clarify, weren't they?
Objection leading. He can ask an open-ended question, Judge, but he can't say that they were clarifying the confusion. And that's why they asked you this question. That's leading. That's counsel testifying, which again, you can do on cross if the defense would have called Robbie. But again, he's a difficult witness. He's not a hostile witness. He's definitely not a hostile witness.
I don't know what they were.
Do you recall the investigators asking you? It wasn't like she was asking for oxys and got M30s. Do you recall them asking you that?
I have read it, but I don't recall them asking me that, no.
But you know that they asked you that from having read the transcript, right?
Your Honor, asked and answered, you said you don't recall.
That is true. And if you would answer that question, please.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you know that investigators asked you, it wasn't like she was asking for oxys and got M30s?
Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah.
Do you recall your answer to that question?
I do not.
Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the transcript of the interview?
Sure.
Scott, can I get 846T again?
Which page do you want to go to?
If we can stay, please, on page 13.
Says I sold her what? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, can you please read to yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Can you please read to yourself from page 13, line 19, and then we'll switch over to 14 in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a good question that I haven't really even been asking myself. That's why I love reading the chat. While the video is playing, because I've watched it already, I listen to it obviously, but I also read the chat. And some people are asking, so if he's selling her 30 to 40 pills multiple times, what's happening with all those pills? Is Kouri just hammering them? Are they doing them together? Is it really for an investor? Like, do they have their real estate agent also get them drugs? I don't know. I guess it's possible. I'm willing to understand I don't live in the same world as every single person lives in a little bit of a different world, right? But what is happening to all those? How does she not have enough to do whatever she needs to do? I guess if she needed fentanyl, something stronger, but like, what's happening to those pills? ICU said, what about Kouri saying Eric didn't do illicit drugs? First off, wouldn't be the first time somebody would think Kouri was lying, number one. But number two, I think this came off the heels of somebody asking about Eric's phone. I think if you had a phone where Eric is like, hey, I do drugs, then sometimes your wife doesn't know, right? Or maybe she was lying to make him not look bad, or I don't know, right? I think if you had other evidence that showed he did, then it could contradict what Kouri said. But right now, everybody's going off of that Kouri was telling the truth on that, which I also find interesting. They believe her when she says that, but not other things. For me, I'm like, I don't know what's true and what's not coming out of her mouth. So I'm looking at the other evidence to see what they can prove.
Your recollection?
I mean, no, but like I can see what it says, but I don't remember having this conversation. But
When the police asked you whether she was asking for oxys and got M30s, do you recall how you responded?
yeah, it says no. She would have got what she asked for. Okay.
He said he doesn't recall.
It's a state.
So some people are telling me Carmen was taking some of the pills. So how many, I guess, because that's a lot of pills. And to me, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting questions around all of this. The real Emily Ross said, I disagree with whoever said you're biased. You bring out points on both sides. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that's how most people feel, and that's why most people are here, right? To talk about this and to try to see on both sides and what could be good, what could be bad, what each lawyer's thinking, why they're doing certain things. I get it, and I appreciate that. You guys are the best. I know you guys got my back. See peace instead? Yes, let's see peace. Let's see peace. Thank you for gifting 5 Lawyer You Know memberships.
So do you recall whether the police asked you if Carmen Lauber knew there was fentanyl in the pills that you sold her?
Again, yeah, it said that.
It's a yes or no question.
Do you recall?
I don't recall. I really don't recall the conversation with the police at all, other than I had the conversation with them. I don't remember details of it other than what I've read.
Do you agree in the interview generally that you confirmed that you sold pills containing fentanyl to Carmen Lauber?
No, I said that. From what I read, I said that she knew what she was. She got what she wanted. Whatever she asked me for is what she got. But I'm pretty sure it was Roxy's. And it was the whole.
I'm pretty sure it was Roxy's. Okay. Does that prove it was Roxy's beyond a reasonable doubt? Absolutely not. Like, this guy is telling us he doesn't remember. He's telling us he was using at the time. He's telling us his brain was not in the right place. He's telling us he gave her whatever she asked for, but he's pretty sure it was Roxy's. So while that doesn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not fentanyl, it certainly crushes the state's ability to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did sell fentanyl. That's the tough part for me. Those kind of comments that he made throughout. Now, was it laced with fentanyl? Sure. Could have been, right? Accidentally, we talked about that, how that happens, a lot, unfortunately. But if you look at the toxicology report, it's like he must have mistaken the pills, which again, we're not really going to get into a lot of the Undercover's testimony, but maybe the state has presented some evidence of that we might not talk about a lot on this channel. But he seems pretty clear. He's the ones where the pills originated from. He describes the differences in colors, different way they look, and he knows what he's selling. And if you accidentally give fentanyl pills instead of Roxy's to one person, as a drug dealer, you're probably giving them to more than one person. And did this happen to more people, right? There's other things to me that would come up. Canceling out the dates and times from these impaired witnesses, I found the drug deals important, like fentanyl looked just like oxy early on. Depending on who you believe, right? And I think that's important. Peter, good morning. Why would they put him on the stand? This was so bad for them. I think they had to because they already had his name mentioned a bunch of times. The witness or the jury wants to hear from him. And if they didn't put him on, the defense would. They had to take their lumps, but also they got some little minor sprinkles in that they could use with other witnesses to kind of build it, I think.
Opening with those cops was them kind of telling me what I had been doing.
So you've read a copy of that transcript.
I have.
Is it an accurate transcript of your interview with detectives that day?
He said he doesn't remember anything about it.
Well, I'm going to let him answer it. You're objecting to foundation. Your foundation's overruled. It's a yes or no question, sir. Or, I don't know. I want to be clear.
Okay, yeah, again, I don't know.
Can we turn now to an affidavit that you signed in September of 2025? Do you know what I'm talking about?
All right, before we get to the affidavit, a couple more questions that I saw interesting. Peter, some of us are biased in the prosecution direction. I watched an earlier hearing and never could have served on this jury, while I think I could have on Adelson. This is some very good self-awareness, and I think that's fine. I'm glad you're here. I want to hear the way you're seeing things and thinking about things, right? There was another one I wanted to read. I lost it. I love that according to the defense, this recovering addict's memory clearing up is good, but there was no way that could happen for Carmen. It felt super disingenuous after the earlier questions. Again, I think everybody's going to take this different ways. From my opinion, if I'm the defense, I'm leaning into everybody's recollection of all of this is not credible. Therefore, they can't prove what happened with these pills. And that's all good for the defense, in my opinion. But his comments about, I just wasn't selling it at that time, is more of like a general habit versus like, I specifically remember exactly what I did that day. So I do find that a difference in their testimony. I believe Kouri was getting pills from Carmen for her and her lover because it's been alleged that he suffered from addiction. I mean, I guess, Fatima, I don't think that's come out in the trial specifically, right? I know we've heard Kouri saying he didn't do drugs, but like, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of this discussion that I think the jury's going to have to kind of pick and choose what parts they believe because there's some contradictory things. Bobby, so glad I finally caught a live. I always appreciate your fair, non-biased take. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. All right, we're going to listen to a little bit now of Robbie say, oh, there's typos. These affidavits are wrong. He lost a lot of credibility here for me. Although it does happen where there are typos and lawyers sometimes don't know the difference between oxycontin and oxycodone. But he's like, oh no, there's typos all over the place. This is where I said oxycodone and she wrote oxycontin. But I thought the prosecutor did a good job being like, well, here's where you like crossed out and wrote something. So why didn't you do that for all the typos if you did it for some of them? So we're just going to get a little sampling of that. But there was a lot, I mean, like through this entire document, he's like, oh, where it says oxycontin, it meant oxycodone. But again, where he crossed out selling and put possession, and then he initialed it RC. Why didn't you do that every time that they wrote oxycontin? Right? I think that's a good point. And we'll hear him explain a little bit of that.
Yes.
Is that accurate with the handwritten correction?
Yeah, the possessing, yes.
Are those your initials next to that possessing that's handwritten?
Yes.
How about paragraph 10? Is that accurate?
Yeah, yes.
How about paragraph 11?
Yes.
Should we go down to paragraph 12? Accurate?
And see, it says, I'm currently in recovery, even though I have relapsed. At this time, I have been sober for about 3 weeks. Okay. So he was saying, oh, I was coming down, whatever. But, you know, this is what law enforcement's going off of.
It is.
13?
So you get the point. He's going, oh, yeah, here's where he's going to say, okay, it's not Oxycontin.
With the exception of the oxycontin again, instead of oxycodone.
So the defense attorneys get up and basically say, one of these affidavits that we prepared, I made the typos for Oxycontin and oxycodone, which I thought was funny. We're going to jump to some of his cross right now.
What's that?
We've met before.
We have?
Yes. Okay. Just gonna ask you a couple of questions about that first interview. You said that with the detectives that you really didn't remember that interview. Mm-hmm. You did say, though, just a moment ago, well, they were just telling me what I'd been doing. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that?
I do.
All right. So during that interview, remember that they just told you what you'd been doing and you just kind of agreed. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I didn't really want to get in trouble. I was already in jail. I had bail. I was trying to get out.
Again, like the defense is presenting a lot of corroborating evidence that these cops were using pressure to get people to say things that were not true, that were good for their case. Peter, what are your thoughts on revoking his immunity? Would it happen? So I didn't do a lot of like giving immunity deals, right? When I was just a low-level little state prosecutor. So what I need to, and my dad and I didn't discuss his testimony on the podcast. I need to talk to my dad more about this. I think they could, based on what he did. They could revoke it. Will they? I don't know. I think we'll have to wait and see. But I think they could say, listen, you were not truthful. You went against what you already signed under oath. So one of these statements was not true. And because you said something that was not true, you lose your immunity. I'd be worried about it if I was him. He doesn't seem too worried about it. Felicia, I find it funny people come at you for being biased when I feel your channel has shown me and many others, I'm sure, how to be fair and listen to the evidence if you're ever a juror. And that's really what I hope, is that if you're ever a juror and you go into these cases, you think about it the way we discuss it here. Force them to really force you to vote guilty. They've got to force you to vote guilty. You don't do them any favors by voting guilty, right? You're not like, I'll forgive this or I'll forget that. Force them to force you to vote guilty. That's how it should be. And if they do, vote it convincingly. I think this guy wants to fully distance himself from selling a drug that took someone's life. I don't blame him. So this was another comment I heard a ton during his testimony. Annex, thank you for gifting 5 Lawyer You Know memberships. Tons of memberships being gifted. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I wasn't. And they kept telling me that I wasn't in trouble and nobody was going after me and things like that. But still, I mean, when they originally came and talked to me and were asking me about, I had no idea who any of the people they were besides Nicole. They showed me pictures and I was like, I don't know who that is. But yeah.
All right, let's fast forward to September of 2025, and you were interviewed by myself and by my investigator, Mr. Bertram, correct?
Yes,
And were you sober when you and I and Mr. Bertram met?
I was.
And do you recall at that interview you told us you thought you had sold to Ms. Carmen 2 times?
I think I said once, maybe twice.
All right.
Same thing I've been saying.
You said once, maybe twice. And that the first time was Roxy 30s, which you've explained, right?
I'm sorry, yes.
And Roxy 30s, and we're going to get to this whole oxycodone,
Okay.
oxycodone thing in just a minute.
Okay.
But Roxy 30s, would that be 30 milligram oxycodone pills?
Yes.
All right. And you said you met her at the Maverick to sell them. And you,
If you would just add a question mark at the end of these as you go.
oh, all right. And you met her at the Maverick to sell them, correct?
Yes.
And that, you remember it was early
When
20.
people get annoyed at lawyers for saying correct, and the judge is like, make sure we know these are a question. That's why you say right or correct or yes or whatever, to make sure you know your question's done and you need an answer now.
22, correct?
Yeah, it was around this time. There was snow then. So
Okay. So can you remember what you were charging per pill for 30 milligram oxycodones?
like either $25 or $30 a piece.
$25 or $30 per pill. You weren't selling fentanyl at that time, but when you did sell fentanyl, what did that sell for?
About the same.
You sold fentanyl for about the same. Are you aware that there was a time that fentanyl was sold for considerably less than oxycodone?
Yes.
Like, and would that have been earlier when fentanyl first started in the market, or would that just depend on who was selling it?
It just depends on who was selling it,
Okay.
where you got it from. You know, if you know a Hondo that'll give them to you for 80 cents, then yeah. But
All right, that's fair.
Could you imagine taking a drug you got for 80 cents? Like, I don't know. I'm not big on like the drug taking world. I don't know how that works, but I know I'd pass.
So, do you recall? Let me back up. So you said that when you sold her, the time that you clearly remember, the first time she was sitting in a car, was anybody with Ms. Lauber?
I don't remember.
You don't remember there being anyone, or you just don't know?
I just don't know. Like if there was some or if she was by herself, I don't know.
Okay. And then, do you recall saying that there was a time you sold to her when a man came with her?
Yes, I do.
So that would have been the second time that we talked about earlier, correct?
Not sure. It could have been the first time, but I probably yeah.
Okay.
If there was twice, why not?
Okay. All right. So, if Ms. Carmen Lauber testified that you told her these are fentanyl pills. I'm selling you fentanyl pills. Would that be true?
I mean, if I said it to her, then it would be true. But I don't know that I said that to her.
Well, were you selling her fentanyl pills?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
And again, that first question for the state, he's like, if I said it, then I think it would be true. So if I'm trying to nitpick and pull some things out that are good for the state, that's one. But then she follows it up with, do you think you did? He said, I don't think so, no. That's tough, man. That's really tough to get over as the state.
And let's go over that again, because I know you were using during that period. Mm-hmm. But why was it that you remembered that in 2022, early 2022, you were selling oxycodone and not fentanyl?
Because everybody was scared of fentanyl in early 2022 and in 21. You know, it was all over the news and people were dying and it was kind of hard to get and people were scared of getting it. And like I testified, I had people that had prescriptions. I had my own prescription and we sold those.
When you said you had prescription and you knew people that had prescriptions, are you talking about oxycodone?
Yes.
Do you remember the milligrams of your...
See, I thought that was a good point too. He remembers what he was selling because he had prescriptions himself and other people, and he would sell the ones that they got for, that he got from the prescription. That I thought was a good point.
prescription?
Mine were 10s at that time.
10s. Did you sell any of those to Carmen Lover?
No.
Okay, so you sold somebody else's prescription.
Yes.
And pills you sold were actually prescription pills from a pharmacy?
Yes.
And do you recall, you met her at the Maverick, and do you recall the person that you were buying from actually lived not super far away from that Maverick? Isn't that correct?
No.
You didn't have a supplier that was pretty close to that Maverick?
No.
You don't recall that you met her there and then you left?
See, he's not being easy for anybody. It's not like he's trying to help the defense either. He's messing it up for everybody basically, which I thought was kind of interesting. Will his I don't know testimony void his immunity deals? I think it's not just I don't know. It's like two different sworn statements here that we're dealing with. So it could be a problem. Hi, Peter. Candace in South Korea here. As a professor of sociolinguistics courses, I use clips of you teaching us about critical thinking and avoiding bias. Thanks from all of us. This feels like an official statement that I'm not biased. I'm going to take this as official from the professor of sociolinguistics. I mean, not just making me read and say that word twice on stream was a test, and I think I passed, I think. As a person of faith, I'm just glad and hopeful that these people are in recovery. I agree. I mean, I think that should always be celebrated and hoped for, and I think you can still look back and judge the credibility of them as witnesses. The jury has to do that. Just because you like somebody or just because they're a cop or just because they're in recovery or just because they're a pastor, right? And they take the stand, or just because they're, a politician. I guess that would mean you probably don't believe them if they're a politician, but just because somebody has a certain background, when they take the stand, it doesn't mean you just believe what they say or you don't believe what they say. You have to judge their credibility individually. Fiona, thank you so much for gifting 10 Lawyer You Know memberships. Let me see if that's the end of this section almost.
And came back?
I don't remember. I might have met somebody down the street, but I don't remember if I didn't go to anybody's house to get them.
All right, that's fair. So somebody met you a ways from the Maverick to give you the pills?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
And those were that person's prescription?
Yes.
Do you know what the milligrams were? Were they 30 milligrams?
They were 30 milligrams.
All right.
So he does get into, we don't really need to listen to too many more, but he kind of says that, he knew what pills, how many pills, what they looked like. And Carmen couldn't answer a lot of those questions. So while I did feel that Carmen was more credible than this witness, I do think that this witness brought a lot of information Carmen couldn't bring that I think the defense will be able to use throughout the case. And we're just going to listen to kind of the end of his cross here, a couple minutes.
This for just a moment.
You just read this, right? April of 2025 to discuss your testimony.
I do.
And that was...
They talk about how there's two affidavits. State only showed you one, and they're just going to talk about some of the information.
Before you met with myself and Mr. Bertram in September of 2025.
Yeah. Yes.
And at that meeting, did you tell them then that you never did sell fentanyl to Carmen Lauber?
I told them that I'm pretty sure that I sold her Roxy's and not fentanyl.
Okay. So you told them, excuse me. You told them basically the same thing that you said in September of 2025 and what you're saying today
Yes.
in your testimony. And did you sign a sworn affidavit that that in fact happened?
I did.
All right. And were you sober when you met with the prosecution in 2025
I was.
to tell them that I never sold her fentanyl, I sold her Roxy 30s,
Yes.
oxycodone?
Oxycodone. Yeah.
Okay. When you
So prosecutors knew, and he swore under oath when he was sober to that. Just how does that make you feel or think, knowing we're here now?
met with, or not met, I'm sorry, you talked to your friend Nicole. What did she tell you? No, let me rephrase that. What was your understanding of what Carmen Lauber wanted? She said, I have a friend who wants some pills. What was your understanding of what that friend wanted?
Yeah, she wanted Roxy's. Roxy's. I'm sorry.
So again, you didn't start selling fentanyl until late 2022.
That's right.
You had no access to it in January, February, March of 2022.
No.
When you did start selling fentanyl, what color were those pills?
Like almost purple.
A really dark color.
Yeah. Yeah, they were very distinctive.
Okay. So not light blue, not light green.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone ever ask you for the Michael Jackson stuff?
I'm sorry.
I think that answers my question. Nobody ever asked you. Carmen Lauber.
I'm sure people have some thoughts about the facial expressions of Kouri Richins. I'm sure they have some thoughts. I also think that sometimes that can endear you to a witness. I'm not sure this witness got there. If I had to guess, I'd say he didn't, but I don't know. First super chat. Hi, Peter. I came in guilty, but so far, even though I don't like Kouri, the state hasn't fully convinced me yet. So to me, if I could alter, family man, what you said a little bit, you came in expecting to vote guilty, but you're trying to do your best to hold the state to their burden and make them convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that she is guilty with the evidence. And I appreciate that. And I get it. I get it. I am expecting a guilty verdict as well, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm going to say, oh, the state proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. You know, like day one, day two. It's like, let's see if they can get there from my estimation. But I fully expect a guilty verdict. I just do. In these types of cases with this public sentiment, and that's why these change of venue motions and lawyers are constantly talking about like all this pressure and what everybody's saying, sometimes it feels like it doesn't matter what happens in court. And that's what we're trying to avoid and change and make sure doesn't happen. It should matter. I'm behind. Peter, not biased. He's consistent and strict adherence to the law, ensures those wrongfully accused get better fair shake. Peter makes law enforcement better. I hope so. And I saw somebody saying like, I hope these televised trials, like cops know how bad this is. It's like, I agree. I hope so too. Do it the right way. How do we know these pills came from a pharmacy? We don't. I don't think we know that. But how do we know they're fentanyl? How do we know that they're fentanyl? Tell me that right now. How do we know those pills were fentanyl that Kouri Richins bought from Carmen and Carmen got them from Robbie? How do we know that beyond a reasonable doubt? That's the question. Hi, Peter. Are you actually on a Saturday? Yes. I have returned to professional dog grooming from a paralegal as I trust dogs more. All the best and kindest regards, Monty. That's funny. Okay, let's keep listening here.
Rescued to sell her the Michael Jackson drug.
No. Is that,
Do you know what that is?
what do they call that? Prohypnol or something?
Propofol.
Propofol. There you go. Yeah, I've heard of it as I watched the Michael Jackson thing when he died, but yeah, nobody's ever asked me for that.
Do you know if you can even
I
buy that on the street?
I doubt it.
Okay.
It seems like they would keep that under a tight lock and key.
All right.
Interesting, right? A lot of talk about that. Peter, between you and Natalie Lawyer Chick, call out things like leading, or to me, the witness didn't prove anything, and you explain what law schools teach about evaluating testimony. Very good insight. Yeah, it's not even just what law schools teach. It's a literal jury instruction that's read to every jury in every trial ever, that they have to judge the credibility of a witness, and they have the ability to believe all, some, or none of what that witness says.
All right. I'm just going to summarize, and then we're going to be done. Okay? So when you initially agreed with detectives that you might have sold fentanyl, you were high, you were coming down, and you don't remember saying that specifically. True?
That is correct. Yes.
And when you met with myself and Mr. Bertram in September of 25, and you said you were selling only oxycodone, you were sober, correct?
Yes.
And you were being truthful?
Yes.
All right. When you met with Mr. Bloodworth and his investigator in April of 2025, you were sober,
Yes.
and you said you were only selling oxycodone in early 2022.
That's correct.
You sober today?
I am.
In fact, congratulations, you just finished your treatment program, right?
Thank you. I did.
What was your sober date?
August 26th.
of 2020?
25.
25. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Robert, I want you to look at the jury. I want you to tell them, are you telling the truth here today?
Yes, I am telling the truth.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Besides that last question, which always does nothing for me, because what are they supposed to say? And a lot of times it's bolstering. You're not even allowed to ask that. But I thought that was a pretty good summary of his testimony and a summary of how this is a major blow to the prosecution team. Whatever you feel, right? You can feel like she's guilty and you would convict her still, and you think it's beyond reasonable doubt, and you don't believe this guy and you don't find him credible. That's fine. That's the only way this doesn't cause a significant blow to the prosecution team. So basically, the prosecution has to believe this guy is just, or the jury, the prosecution has to get the jury to believe this guy is not credible. He's lying. I don't believe his testimony. And then we can get back on to, is what Carmen said enough, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, they have more coming. But that's a huge blow to the prosecution team if they believe almost anything that Robbie said. Now, will they? I don't know. The same thing could have happened for Brendan Banfield. If they believed what he said, huge blow to the prosecution team. Did the jury believe what Brendan Banfield said? Absolutely not. That's why the jurors have to judge the credibility. How noticeable do you think it is to the jury how nice the defense treated Robert about his drug use versus the nasty way they treated Carmen about hers? Again, I think this is going to be a person-by-person basis. I think some jurors, it's going to be very obvious that Robbie was good for them and Carmen was bad for them, that Robbie was more sympathetic to them and easier on them. I think the state was the same. I think the state was much more difficult with Robbie than they were with Carmen. But again, most people point out how the defense treated them. I initially thought prior to trial she was guilty, but I'm not so sure now. Too much reasonable doubt thus far. I could vote not guilty at this point. Now, we're 1 week in. We're like a quarter, maybe less, maybe more of the way into this trial, so there's still a lot more to come. For some reason, Robbie's testimony would not come into the courtroom. For some reason, Robbie's attorney, would not come into the courtroom. That judge had to get the sheriff to order her in, or she was going to get charged with failure to appear. Interesting. Maybe she didn't want to be a part of whatever's coming next. I don't know. What kind of additional evidence can the state put on to prove Kouri gave Eric the drugs? This is where I'm struggling. Her text messages, her conversations with people. If she said, I'm going to get rid of him, I've got a plan. I think her comments and conversations she maybe had with other people could give us something. Maybe if something she's done in the past, put it in his food or drink. If there's some admission of that, if they have more proof about the sandwich thing, like the modus operandi, the way she does things could come in. So we'll see. I'm just going to stay open. I'm not going to say, oh, guarantee they will, guarantee they won't. I'm going to stay open and see what they present, right? That's the big deal from my perspective. Okay, let's talk about the next two witnesses. I'm not even going to put Haskell, I think his last name's picture on our screen because it was very weird. They talk about his experiences doing, drug cases. They talk about, how he's a cop. They get into some procedure and then it goes blank and cameras are shut off, audio's shut off. The judge is like, sorry, we've got to close this up. And from my perspective, when I've had this happen, it's either they'll completely block off the way the person looks. They might distort the sound. They might have the camera showing the person's hands. They might clear the courtroom. From this perspective, they show his face. We hear his voice. We hear him talk. Then cameras get shut off, but they leave the courtroom open because I had a ton of people message me what he testified to. But I don't want to go into what he testified to when the cameras were off and the audio was off. The judge did that for a reason. I don't know what that reason is. I know that some of that evidence, we may, discuss that the state may have presented some evidence like this vaguely. We're not going to attribute it to him. But I don't want to go anywhere near the line, right? People talk about like crossing the line, getting as close to the line as you can. I don't want to go anywhere near the line. I'm going to assume it was either protected procedure he was discussing or he's an undercover with some kind of operation or something that shouldn't be out there for his safety or for the protection of other investigations going on. So from my perspective, that's all we're going to say about that officer because the audio and the video was turned off for a reason. But I do think that he helped advance the ball down the field for the state. So I'll say that much. Okay. But not the right way you're supposed to handle it. Like when we have something like this come up, we usually have multiple hearings about what is the best way to handle this. Because like I said, my dad and I had a federal case with an undercover agent that they had to put a screen around him to where the jury could see him and we could see him, but the audience couldn't. And he was wearing a disguise, which we thought was overboard, and we fought against that. But the judge allowed it to happen. Because if it's like, whatever, we don't have to relitigate that. And they distorted his voice. So you usually have multiple hearings on that to figure out what the best way is to handle that. You don't do it like in the middle of his testimony, which I didn't feel great about, but it is what it is. And then we had another SVU officer who talked about downloading the phones. Some of the phones were broken. He fixed the phones, which we already heard about, those broken phones, fixed them to get the data. Him fixing them didn't affect the data that was on the phone. Dog grooming, Danny said, as a professional dog groomer for 19 years, I want to go back to school and work smarter, not harder. Awesome to catch a Saturday morning live. I never would have guessed we had so many dog groomers in here, especially with some of the testimony that came out on day 5. How about that? It's confusing with these witnesses, but then you read her text and her guilt is clear. And again, more of that is going to come, which is why we're just discussing where we're at right now. So I'm sure if she's convicted, everybody's going to be like, oh, go back and watch this. He thought she was not guilty, blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's a method to our madness here. There's a method to our madness. I think most people here would be horrified to be convicted on the evidence shown so far. I agree with you. If it was you would feel very differently. Or if it was like a cause you believed in, like Karen Reed. If they presented this same exact evidence against Karen Reed so far, everybody would be like, oh, please. This doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. This person's a liar. The pictures are inverted. It's like and I'll tell you, this is true. This is how people are. When we have cases and we say, when the jury starts to come along with us, they'll forgive some problems. They'll see things our way. If they hate us and they're going the other way, we could have a really good point that they're going to disregard. This is how it works. This is how people are. Thanks for your recaps and overtime. Always learning and appreciate you. Looking forward to Papa T. So I already know what's going to happen. Some people are going to ask for the podcast to be released early on Sunday, especially when they see the teaser. So here's what I'm going to say. If we can get this video up to over 7,500 likes before tomorrow, okay, which is pretty quick. So everybody hit the like button now. We will release the podcast on Sunday instead of Monday when we usually do. Probably Sunday night if we can get there. Think most people here would be horrified to be... Oh, sorry, I already read that. I keep going back to the toxicology report. Where did the fentanyl come from? There's going to be more evidence coming to put that into further context. And that's a really smart thing, Michelle, to do because, well, maybe it was Roxy, maybe it was THC, maybe it was laced, maybe it was... But it's like, but why isn't that stuff in his system if it was just laced with fentanyl? There'd be a combination, right? Seems like it was almost just fentanyl and then a little bit of ethanol, which was it post-mortem created or was it from a little bit of alcohol? We don't really know that yet, or we don't know that beyond a reasonable doubt because the prosecution pointed out it's equally possible that it's this or that. But yeah, we know the fentanyl's in his system. We know enough to kill him a lot. Where did they get the fentanyl from? How did it get there? That's the question. Did Eric get it? Did Kouri get it? Did Eric take it willingly? Did Kouri force it on him? They need to prove those points to get to guilty beyond a reasonable doubt for these charges. That's a big question still looming out there. All right. That's all we got, folks. This was a really interesting day. I appreciate you guys showing up early on a Saturday morning. I love the Saturday morning lives. I want to continue it as much as I can. We're going to run into spring break here in the middle of this trial for me, and I'm traveling with my kids and my family. So that'll be a little bit of a different schedule, but I am planning to do no Friday night lives. Instead, Saturday morning, 8 a.m. I love hanging out with you guys, starting my weekend like this. This is the best. So please hit that like button, and maybe we'll be seeing you tomorrow if we post the podcast tomorrow. But you guys are the best. I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your comments, even if we disagree, even if you see it differently than me. That's what I love. That's what helps build the conversation here. But until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. And if you have a case that you want to personally talk to us about in your life, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, truck accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.